Hello, Facebook. Welcome to another Witch on Fireside chat here from my home altar witchcrafting room, my home office where I do all my writing for witchonfire.net for Pathos Pagan. Today is April 21st. I have no idea how many days of quarantine this makes, but it's been a lot, and it's going both surprisingly fast and slow at the same time. Hello, Lisa and Jenny. Glad to see you guys coming in. Again, I was a few minutes late. I apologize. I had some things to pull together. So I've got some fun things planned for tonight, I think, as a kind of continuation from 2 nights ago when we were talking about how to approach the witchcraft community or the pagan community and to figure out how to get into all of this with other people, presuming that someday we actually get together with other people again. So I guess that's what's on all of our minds. Witchcraft being such a solitary thing so often really does lend itself to group work so beautifully well, and frankly we miss it. I know folks in the Soja Circle Coven on a little private chat were just the other day like mournfully, I miss you guys, I wish we could get together. So I understand how isolation can feel lonely. Hi, Alan. And Rob. Hi. So I've got some fun things about just what do you need to know to get started with all of this stuff. But I've also got some pretty deep ideas also. I'd like to clear up some misconceptions. I'd like to possibly even talk about some of my top recommended books to get started. So without further ado, a question that was posed to me, I think it was this morning by Alan, was one of the first videos when we were talking about waters, collecting rainwaters, and then charging them for the altar, for the moon water, for example. I mentioned, and I can't demonstrate it. Hey, Bo, I did mention that in collected rainwaters, if you collect rain, especially good if you collect rain during the spring, during the zodiac periods of Aries, Taurus, and Pisces, I guess. No, I think it was just Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. Anyway, that especially in the spring, especially in a thunderstorm, if you collected rainwater, this was very prized among alchemists. If you then let the rainwater sit for a while in a jar, especially if you let it remain in a warm place and able to breathe a little bit, eventually what will form is called gur. And what the question was, hey, first of all, how do you spell that? And two, what's that all about? And I thought I would just recommend a source. So this past summer, I got really into the study of alchemy. This book is called Real Alchemy, a primer of practical alchemy by Robert Allen Bartlett. It's a little thing, and I still haven't gotten all the way through it because it's dense. This guy's also a chemist, and it is very hands-on. Alchemy is like the lab science of Hermeticism, right? If you really want to get into real alchemy. And I thought I would just read from the section about gur, G-U-R is how you pronounce that, and a description of what it is. So here's what I've got from Robert Allen Bartlett, page 74. Well, first of all, here's what I wanted to collect. So, the idea being that the sun, here I want to start reading on 71. Let's go do some excerpts. The sun radiates the vital energies throughout our solar system. This universal fire of life is one of the alchemist's secret fires. As this spiritual fire hits our atmosphere, it condenses in the air and is carried by it. As the air fills with moisture, the universal fire condenses even further and moves into the water. The water gathers and it starts to rain. This water, charged with the secret fire, which is called a universal mercury, becomes determined for use by a particular kingdom when it hits the earth, kingdom being animal, mineral, or vegetable. If it falls on plants, it is determined to the vegetable kingdom. touched by or drunk by a man or animal, it is determined for the animal kingdom. If it strikes the earth, the mineral kingdom. So there was an ancient source called the Golden Chain of Homer, which provides one of the clearest descriptions of the process of collecting that. And the text describes this universal fire generating as an invisible and almost subtle humidity, which consequently undergoes a gentle fermentation to generate universal acid. Blah, 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 on it goes. The idea is that it is the most subtle, spiritual, incorporeal niter of spiritus mundi. This universal acid enters the atmosphere. It rains down on earth. In modern practical alchemy, the element hydrogen is attributed to fire, nitrogen to air, oxygen to water, and carbon to the element of earth. Okay, so hydrogen being the most abundant element in the universe, it's called the first matter. And it's the first carrier of fire, while nitrogen possesses the most blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here's the thing. If you can collect this rainwater, it then coagulates to a degree this spiritual fire. And in the Golden Chain of Homer, it provides a method, and it's that what's that thing that collects in the water, or that it forms in the water, that looks like a milky, whitish, brownish. It's like almost like cotton fluff. It's a little gelatinous. It's called the universal seed of nature. So what they would do is they would collect this rainwater and they would nurture this gur, this universal seed, by collecting the rainwater in a way that it didn't touch any plants or minerals or animals. And so then you could collect that water in, say, a plastic bucket. I know plastic being a weird thing. I would have said glass, but I guess that's technically a mineral. The trick is you want it to be inert. And as we know, plastic is an unholy, not natural thing. Hello, everyone. I see all your names popping up, and I'm so happy to see you. Angie and Stephanie. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. So we're talking about that gooey stuff that forms in rainwater if you collect it in a jar or a bowl, and then you leave it in a jar in a warm place for a little while. Alchemists call this universal gur, G-U-R, or the seed of nature. So what you would do is you might collect it in some plastic. It has to be inert. Like I said, plastic is an unholy, unnatural thing, man-made, and so it doesn't get determined for anything that would be living if it touches it. And then you fill it with a bucket. If you just covered it with like a cloth to keep dust out of it, well, first of all, you want to filter it. You want to filter it out for any particulates. And then you want to just leave it covered so dust doesn't get in it, in a warm space. 30 to 40 degrees Celsius is what they suggested, but just something slightly warm corner of the house, for at least a month, but longer is better. They said that alchemists might leave it up to a year. But so they refer to it as a white to brownish solid-like tufts of cotton floating in the water, and that's the universal gur, or seed of nature. And then there's processes for how they allow that to ferment in the bucket, and then you put it in a distillation apparatus, and you sweat it a little bit here, and then as you do a little bit more refining, you pull off the fire and air of water and the water of water. Ultimately, what you get down to is just the matter in the water, and then you allow that to the gur, you allow it to dry out in the sun, and then so the rest of the moisture dries off, and then you take what's left, and that's the gur. And the idea is that then the alchemist could determine that seed of nature to anything it wanted to be. They wanted it to be. Theoretically, you could create the sorcerer's stone. You could create any mineral or any plant from that, or any animal from that. So when you collect rainwaters, if you get that little bit of gooey stuff in there, that is not a bad thing. Certainly don't be drinking this water. But Alan said she likes to feed that water to her plants, which are part of a beautiful plant that's part of her altar, and the plant does seem to be thriving. So just consider that a very special thing. And then if you wanted to think of it as like a seed of potential that you could then nurture into something else magically, whether you get into all this fancy alchemy or not, I'd say that was a good foundation for that working. Anyway, I do recommend this little book. We have a bunch of books on alchemy. Once I figured out this guy's stuff, I went and got a lot of the books for the Sojourner that we had previously, that he had mentioned. I got them for the store. Okay, so that was the question on Gur. Welcome, everybody. Here's what I wanted to do today. In my theme of helping new people, especially younger people, but even if you've been at this for years and all you've been doing is reading books and you'd like to get out there and meet folks. 2 videos ago we talked about all those etiquette and means of going about that. But I wanted to just take that a little bit further, especially for the subject of witchcraft. And one of the things that I think that we provide best when I get into my secret classes at the Sojo, and that's, our students coming in fresh, and you don't have to have any prior experience to show up for one of our seeker classes. Seeker means, all that means is that you are seeking more information. But maybe you've been reading books for 10 years like I had. Before I actually talked to anyone about all this, all I had was books. So you read, but they don't always give the phonetic, how do you say this? And I have to admit that when I first met pagan people, there were some unfortunate moments where I'm trying to have a conversation about concepts I read in the book, and I didn't say it the way they said things, and they laughed in my face, and they were very rude and hurtful, like ridiculing, almost like bullies. Well, it was insensitive anyway, or maybe I was overly sensitive, but it hurt my feelings, and I didn't think it was necessary. By contrast, years later, Christopher Penczak comes to town to teach. We've been at this forever. He's a perfect gentleman and scholar. We're having a conversation about a concept, and I mispronounced a word. But I didn't know. Everyone I'd ever been around had said it the way I said it. And he just, without really interrupting me, he goes, actually, that word is pronounced this other way, and here's why I say that. But it's a little known thing, now you know. And we just moved on in our conversation. Didn't make me feel bad at all. So, I think that if you start hanging around the witchcraft community, we all can help each other out by cluing a new seeker in to how we pronounce these things without being jerks about it. So, and it's another apple juice night, because as Heather said last time, that would be a very big bourbon, and I'm not that luscious. Okay, so I made you guys I made flashcard kind of things. This, let me see if this works. Yes, it does. Can y'all see that word? All right, this word is the word that I had mispronounced to Christopher, and he very nicely corrected me. There is still some debate on exactly its pronunciation. There are variations. I know I opened this conversation on my Witch on Fire page today, and excellent author, linguist folks like Morgan Diamond jumped in on this question. This means clockwise or sunwise. So when you move clockwise or sunwise, this is how you're moving. And she said that it is Jieshul. Christopher said Jedsul. But at any rate, it is not Deasil. How about that? So let's see, Zeshul, I think it would be Zeshul, or Zeshul. The alternative to that is counterclockwise, which I did not make a card for because it's pretty self-explanatory, and that's the word Widdershins, and that's counterclockwise. Another one for this thing. This word. Nope, that's backwards. That word. Alright, this one is one of those hot debate ones. Everybody says it differently. It's regional. I tagged Christopher, Jason Mankey, because he wrote the book on this, literally. He wrote the book on the Witch's Blade for Llewellyn, for the Witch's Tools series. Okay, so he tells us that this is basically a word created by Gerald Gardner, and that if I get his phonetics right, he had it athame. In the Midwest, he says, though, it's athame, and that's, I think, how I say it. I'll also sometimes call it athame, That's apparently the California way. And the East Coast is sort of a mixed bag in my experience. One of them is that they call it an alchemy, and frankly I cringe, but hey, to each their own. What it is not, universally, is a theme. So, your ritual knife. Athame, athame, athame. So many ways. This is my tarot deck. Tarot or tarot. This is a French word, so there is no T on the end. It would not be, under any circumstances, tarot or tarot. Just not it. And I will say that if you come to ask if you can professionally read tarot cards at my store, and you tell me that you're a professional tarot reader, and then my next question is always, oh yeah, how long have you been studying the tarot? And if you say a year, well, you're not going to get to read tarot cards in my store. It takes a long time to master that, and if you haven't done enough study to realize how to pronounce it, I don't think you're ready to be reading professional, but that's just my opinion. I have pointy opinions. Okay, this happens to be a particular style of tarot deck. This crazy word, how's that pronounced? Well, I've done some research on that. Now, I say Toth, like it rhymes with oath. I have seen it called Toth, like moth. I have done some research, and I think that it might, in some circles, academic circles, especially if you try to get back to the Egyptian god's name and not necessarily the name of the deck, I'm not sure. Taught, like the word taught, I taught you something. Or thought. Interesting, considering the name of this god in Egypt is for wisdom, communication, knowledge, writing, thought, thinking, academics. That's interesting. Basically, what this is supposed to be is the Greek interpretation of a Sahidic Coptic, which is Egyptian, name of the god, the ibis-headed god, which is Tahuti. So, it's really a mixed bag. What I don't think I've ever heard anybody say is Thoth. But then again, who knows? Alright. Here's a common one. Toth. Okay, good. Well, I appreciate that. That's what I use. Toth. I guess, or Toth. Whatever Heather's saying there. It's, what I don't think you do is pronounce the first TH, like the, one way or the other. Okay. This one. Chakra. It's a soft R, soft rolled R. Chakra. I know everyone says chakra in the West, but that's a bunch of white people getting it wrong. I'm sorry. Chakra. And that'd be the energy centers in your body. Okay, let's talk about some of the Sabbats. So there's 8 solar holidays of the Wheel of the Year in Pagandom. There are also many different names for these holidays. I long ago just decided to use the names that were used in the Witch's Daily Planner, and it was consistent with this book, which is one of the training books that I've suggested before, Wicca Year and a Day by Timothy Roderick. So these are the names of the Sabbats that I use. I know that varies based on tradition. These are not all necessarily ancient words. That's right, Heather. Tomatoes. All right. But some of these words come from other languages, and those languages know exactly how to pronounce their words, so we try to go back to those old languages and figure out what it is. Okay. To me, what is sort of the grand kickoff of the great work, the wheel never ends. It just keeps spinning, right? But I consider the great work beginning with this one, Imbolc. And this is a name from the Celtic traditions. So some version of Gaelic, there are many versions of that Gaelic, so this word varies. But in all of them, the B is silent. Imbolc is how I say it. Spring equinox. There are other names for that too. Ostara is how I say that one. This is coming up. Not long now. Beltane's coming. So Beltane, easy. There's also various spellings in the Gaelic, but just Beltane. Mostly I like it looks. High spring. There are many different names also for this, the Sabbath that means the beginning of summer. It's the very first day of the summer season, summer solstice. I chose Letha. This is not an ancient word. This was derived, I believe this is one of the ones derived by Aidan Kelly in, I think, the 80s or the 60s. I don't know. Pretty recently. He came up with Ostara and Mabon, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so not an ancient word, but it means, I pronounce it Letha. Other people might call it midsummer. I don't, because it's not midsummer. Llamas is midsummer, but anyway. But hey, to each their own. This is the one. This is the Hail Mary, give us a break. Woo! From the Gaelic. Gaelic always has all the extra letters in it. I've seen it Lunasa and Lunasa. The god Lu, that L-U-G-H, it's pronounced Lu. And so a Celtic celebration of around the first week of August, Lunasa. I don't have a particularly Celtic practice, so I use another word for that same holiday. I prefer Llamas. There are root words that say that have that derivation being like loaf mass, and as I celebrate the first harvest of grains, I just think it's easier. Llamas, not llamas like the beast. Llamas. Okay, that would be high summer, and then there's the beginning of summer. The midpoint. Oh, I'm sorry. The beginning of autumn, blurred. Woo, Mabon or Mabon. I've also seen it Mabun. It depends on your spelling again. But anyway, Mabon or Mabon. This is the killer though. This is how you know you've actually talked to witches or you've studied your Gaelic. Samhain. Samhain. Absolutely Samhain. I have occasionally seen that maybe in like a Scottish derivation it might be Samhain. But anyway, it is not Samhain. Period. So, what that is the third harvest of meats. It's the very high point of autumn. Which transitions us into the first day of winter. Yule. Just Yule. You're welcome. Okay. I have two more. I don't have the complete answer to this one. Over on the Witch on Fire page today, there was some really great conversation, and I'm hoping we'll get more. Also sometimes spelled with a K there in the middle. The Greek goddess, the chthonic goddess, often considered the goddess of witches, goddess of the crossroads and of magic and wisdom. Definitely witchcraft all the way. That H is almost entirely silent. My understanding is it is either Hecate or Hecate, but it is very light on the H, and it is definitely not Hecate. And then this is my favorite one, which we're going to go on a bit about, because I have a bit of a rant about this. The oft misunderstood and yet wonderful symbol, Baphomet. This word and much of the lore around it we get from Eliphas Levi, who is a French occultist. He also mostly called it the goat of Mendes, or the sabbatic goat, if I understand correctly. Most of the time people in America here will call it Baphomet. It doesn't offend me or anything, but it is a French word, so I think Baphomet is probably closer. And who we are referring to, you will know him if you've watched the chilling Sabrina. Chilling Stories of Sabrina or whatever. That guy. Right there. Baphomet. Fascinating creature. Allegory. The Sabbatic goat. See how at the bottom it's actually signed by Eliphas Levi. This right here is an allegorical symbol. There's lore that speaks to how it was involved with the Knights Templar. Between the history of magic by Eliphas Levi and transcendental magic, there's a great description. I just want to describe this to you because who this is, to me, is not a deity. It is an allegory for the Hermetic principles. It is a concept of the Supreme Being, the Divine Mind, that is pantheistic. It's it is represented by nature, but it is not necessarily the god of the witches. I mean, it is allegorical. So I wanted to read this bit. We could go on and on about this. I'm not going to get too bogged down, but I just wanted to. This is from the footnotes of this book when they're referring to it. Eliphas Levi says that the hypothetical idol Baphomet was a symbolical figure representing the first matter of the magnum opus, which is the astral light. That it signified further the god Pan, which may be identified with the Christ of dissident sacerdotalism. I don't even know that word. That the Baphometic head is a beautiful allegory which attributes to thought alone the first and creative cause of creation. And finally, that it is nothing more than an innocent and even pious hieroglyph. The reason why I say that is because we'll have the Baphomet statue in the store, and I could go on and on about how beautiful it is. I practice Hermetic witchcraft. The principles of Hermetic alchemy, Hermetic philosophy, they're the underpinnings of my witchcraft. They informed all of occultism and astrology and tarot and Kabbalah. And the Baphomet was considered an allegorical symbol of those principles. And my understanding, and this is from a story in my other favorite book, Secret Teachings of All Ages, by Manly P. Hall, who was a Grand High Poobah Masonic dude, tippy top. This is back in the 20s. He wrote an article about Baphomet as well. And my understanding of the story is that the symbol was created for one of the advanced initiations where you were led into a room and this symbol was revealed in some spooky way. And if you saw it and got scared and called it the devil, then you did not pass the initiation. If you saw it and you recognized it for its Hermetic principles, then you passed. So I find it interesting when it is referred to as the god of the witches and it is deified as if it is a person. The magnum opus and the first cause and all of that has a name in Greek, and it is nous, N-O-U-S. Anyway, that was a mini rant. So one of the things that I want to talk about beyond all the words, I love words, was what it means to be a seeker of witchcraft and magical training. Because we did talk about that previously, and I mentioned it before. And I wrote an article a while back that I print myself a copy so I could maybe hit the highlights on it. A seeker of witchcraft is, like I said, anybody who's seeking more information. So we're all seekers at all times. If you say, I'm no longer a seeker, I am the master of everything, I know it all, I'm here to tell you, you are at the beginning, not the end. There is a inverse relationship between this wisdom and hubris of thinking you know it all. The more you know you don't know. So anyway, we're all seekers at all times. And we all have something we can share with each other. But anyway, my opinion is that witchcraft is like an orientation. I mean, it's a praxis that anybody can do. There are plenty of people who are like, oh, I'm just going to do this bit. I just broke my necklace. This bit of witchcraft. And that's fine. Anybody can pick it up. The witchcraft itself can happen within any other religious framework. However, I think that there are some people who are just of the witchery, you know? It's an orientation. It's like part of who you are. There are common traits. There are common fundamental aspects of being that people who eventually migrate into a witchcraft practice or seek it out, we just have inherently. Skills, viewpoints, things that we were like, I'm the weirdest black sheep that ever was. I'm a practicing my religion of one. But you have a certain way of seeing and doing and feeling and interrelating with the world. You're aware in a different way. You have different skills and abilities of perception. Probably have some sort of healing ability. You sense the interconnectedness between all things when you're in the woods. I do think you can be, I think that people are born with a proclivity for this, to answer Stephanie's question. And every religion has people like this. It can run in families, but honestly, I don't know, because that was something someone asked on the feed. But I do not think it runs necessarily through genetics, unless you just think that perhaps there's a genetic capability for psychic ability, that kind of thing. Possible. What I'm saying is that no matter what your religion is, there is a class of people that are the more mystics, right? They might be called prophets in Christianity. They might be called, there's lots of people I know who consider themselves mystic Christians. There's the Bruja, every culture has got a name for that person that is the more mystical, esoteric, healer, energy, psychic person that just can intuit in a different way than other people. They tend to be very radically free-minded and all of this sort of thing. Anyway, so I just think it's part of who we are. Now, whether you want to start practicing a neo-pagan religion, it's kind of a secondary consideration. But anyway, I think that once you realize this is who you are, and there's like a witch flame that ignites, they say, or maybe it is a genetic memory, like Heather says, there's this catalyst effect at some point in your life where it's like it quickens. And sometimes they refer to this as the fire in the witch blood, but that gets people confused with like genetics, and I don't know, it just starts to smack a little bit about the way Death Eaters talk in Harry Potter and makes me a little squidgy. But there is something that just, it's a catalyst effect, and it just ignites the fires of the soul, and you suddenly are like, there's something deeper, bigger, more, you have perhaps a psychic flash or a mystical experience or a dream or a vision, or something happens that jars the ordinary for you, and it becomes this greater insight. It's moments of a mystical insight that's really you just, the veil of illusion of our separateness just drops for a minute, and you're like, that's it, I knew it, it was there. And then you got to go seeking it out. It is a calling. I think it's a calling to this work. And it is a sacred purpose, a sacred mission to then be that interconnected person with the cosmos in a deeper, more meaningful way. You realize that all this bullshit floating up here on the surface barely scratches it. There's something so much more meaningful and interconnected down deep, and you realize it. The witch fire within, just in case you guys are wondering, that's why my blog is called Witch on Fire. That right there. Okay, so let's say you figure it out, and then you find out, there is a thing called Wicca, or there's a thing called witchcraft, which is in neo-paganism, and maybe you go start reading some books on that. Maybe you say, all right, well, I'm going to try a spell or a ritual or something and see what happens, see how it feels. And so maybe you just, following like a recipe in a book, you try it out, and it just rocks your world. Something amazing happens, and now you are on fire by God. You're going to find more. There would be pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, nothing that would stop a true witch from finding the next level, right? Yes, that's next level shit. So that's how it was for me. That's how it is for most people. And people will come in the store and be like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but here's this thing. And then they'll give me a story which is unique and beautiful. And I don't want to say, that their unique, beautiful, mystical, magical experience was in any way common, because that's not fair. But they are singing the song of our people, right? They're like, I didn't even give a crap about religion until like 3 years ago, and then suddenly this thing and this vision and this, I'm dreaming, and now I see my dead grandmother and she's helping me out and blah, 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 I don't know what to do. And I've been reading a book and now I find out there's witchcraft and help me. And I'll be like, welcome, my sister or my brother, to the craft. Welcome to your people. Allow me to introduce you around. And there is a lot of comfort in knowing you're not just crazy. So now you really want to find your way in. Now there aren't training covens everywhere. Like I said, I read books for 10 years, and then when I decided that I wanted to go meet someone, I had a cataclysmic visionary experience that basically kicked my butt out of complacency and out into the world. As a matter of fact, I wrote as a prologue in my book the story of this, and I don't know that it's gonna, the one that I'm working on now, I don't know that it's gonna end up even getting to stay because I'm way over the word count. But once that cataclysmic experience happened, I knew I had to find it. Moreover, I knew I had to do this as like my life. So finding a teaching group isn't easy. There may not even be one in town. To seek with groups like we described 2 nights ago, there's a long interview process where it's about finding out if you're right for them and they're right for you. I sought with 3 covens before I ultimately settled in where I was. Some of them, I walked away from them going, thank you, but that's not for me. Other times they gave me the big old rejection letter, and I am grateful to them for it. They're like, no, I don't think you match what we have to offer. And sure, I might have been a little, feeling a little wounded at the time, a little disappointed, but it is a blessing. So don't hold that against anybody. If it doesn't look like it's going to work out, just trust that the universe is sending you where you need to be. But you don't have to just wait for someone else. Remember, we are internalizing the locus of our control. I yacked on and on and on about that in my video last time. You have to internalize your locus of control, security, and authority. So yes, we can learn from other people, and that experience is great, but you can't just sit around and wait for some guru on high to come and wave their wand over you and go, like the way a knight is bestowed. I hereby knight thee a witch. Don't wait for some guru on a hill to tell you what you can do. But even before then, there are things everybody needs to do to get ready for the higher level shit of psychism and channeling divinity and astral travel and all that. There's things you need to do to get ready. So I wanted to go through what those were, because basically that's what you need to be doing anyway. And even if you find a program right now, you're still going to have to do it anyway, only it'll be a little overwhelming perhaps. So here's some things I just wanted to say about that. Jenny just posted on there, I can feel this, tried with 2 different groups here, decided they just didn't fit me. It's better to do your own thing. That's right. I think that it's actually probably better to just do your own thing than to try to jam a square peg in a round hole, for example. But every group is different, and we're not all doing the same thing. Like I said, witches are the most deviant of all deviant religious expressions, and among us we deviate so radically that even no 2 witches are going to believe exactly the same. So you just have to be able to find some common ground enough to work some common rituals and things like that together. Like, can you be happy in some middle ground together when you're together, and then when you're on your own, you do your own thing. But anyway, so here's what I want you to think about. Witchcraft, which does seem very fantastical and cool, and it's not like Harry Potter. Harry Potter's a secular story. Pardon me, apple juice break.